Hi, my name is Anita Dixon. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Wyoming, Minnesota. Thank you for joining me. In this video, I would like to share with you some creative ideas and tips for using the Basic Border dies. If you don't already have the Basic Border dies, you can find them in the annual catalog, the May 2022 to April 2023 catalog on page 169. These are an awesome set of dies. There are 6 in the set, each with a different decorative edge, and each are 6 inches long. Now, typically the cards that I make are 5.5 by 4.25. However, sometimes I make slimline cards or scrapbook pages. And for those, these dies work just as well. Let me show you. Here, I've taken a piece of navy cardstock, and I used this die right here. It's like a zigzag with a decorative edge to it. And laying it on my cardstock, I ran it through the die cutting machine. I then lined up this little tab with the last little scallop there, and laying it on the cardstock, I ran it through the die cutting machine a second time. That gave me 2 pieces of decorative cardstock. Now I can use this on a scrapbook page, one by itself, or both for a top and the bottom of the page. I could also cut these and use on other projects. Now here's a card that I used the stencil that I called the cloud stencil, because it gives me the image of a cloud. So the first thing I did was to create a template for myself, and I made this out of vellum. I labeled my stencil Cloud Stencil so that I could easily find it. Now to create the clouds, I laid my stencil onto the cardstock, and using my Balmy Blue ink and one of our blending brushes, I inked up my blending brush, and stamping off the page, I added some color to my card, adding a little bit more until I got the desired effect. Now you can see that I used this same stencil to create the snow on this card. Isn't it gorgeous? The penguins come from the Penguin Place bundle, which is a stamp set and a punch, and it can be found on page 22 of the mini catalog. Now I love this die because I found it has multiple uses for it. We used it in the clouds, I used it on the snow, but I also used it on this card here to create this lovely border. The stamp set that I used on this card is the Perfectly Penned. And some of the black matte dots I used to finish off the card. Now there is another card that I use this same stencil. So I've used it in 4 different ways. On this card, I added several layers of coloring using the cloud die yet again. I die cut the first color on the left. I wanted each of the colors to line up with the previous color. To do that, I laid the previous die cut piece onto the next color, like this, and then laying the stencil onto the cardstock face down. And I like to use a Post-it note or this labeling and cover-up tape. It's narrow and it works perfectly for holding the die in place. Because it is so narrow, I found that the small pieces work better than a Post-it note. I continued this with the other layers as well, and then added a couple of butterflies. Here's my little note. I got this idea from Danielle Cassing, and she's from the Netherlands. The next card that I want to show you is this one. I used the scalloped edge die and then a piece of designer paper to show off the trim. For this card, I used this die. Isn't that lovely? So the stamp set and dies on this card are from the Hello Harvest bundle. I used the new leaf embossing folder behind the flower arrangement. The embossing folder can be found on page 53 of the July to December mini catalog. The next card, I used the V-shaped die, and that is this one. When I cut the white paper, I cut it to allow 1/8 of an inch of the gorgeous grape to show at the top and at the bottom, and about 1/4 of an inch here. I love that the stitching is on both pieces. The flowers on this card are die cut from the Hues of Happiness designer paper. This card I was inspired by Kristen Bryant. The card base is actually 8.5 by 5.5, and after die cutting here with the zigzag, that would be this one, I then added a piece of Evening Evergreen cardstock that measures 5.5 by 4.25, and it is attached to this piece right here. I wanted to show some of the Evening Evergreen, and I determined about how much I wanted. That's about maybe a 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch. So I cut that much off of this piece that I had trimmed from here. I next added a spray of leaves from the Artistic Dies and added a greeting at the bottom. This next card uses the decorative zigzag die. On this card, I stamped my greeting first to ensure that I had enough room for the die cutting. I attached a piece of designer paper from the Lovely and Linen Designer Series pack to the back, and like the previous card, it is cut 5.5 by 4.25, and I attached it to the left-hand side of the card, and then I trimmed off about an inch off of this piece right here so that the designer paper would show through, and then added a little bit of ribbon and some pearls. This next card is one of my favorite. I love flowers, and I use the half circle die to create 2 layers on this card. I stamped my flower first to ensure that I had left enough room to accommodate it, and the flower is from the Cottage Rose stamp set, and I colored it with our Sweet Sorbet and Soft Seafoam Stampin' Blends, and a little bit of Daffodil Delight for the flowers in the inside. The next 2 cards were created pretty much together. I created this card first. I used the V-shaped die again, but this time I put it on the right side of the card rather than on the bottom of the card. And I die cut first, and then stamped my flowers and my greeting, and then I added a piece of the black cardstock measuring 5.5 by 4.25 and attached it to the left side that I had die cut. Now the white piece that I cut off that was die cut is attached to this card. And then I layered a piece of black cardstock that I have die cut also and layered underneath the white. The designer paper is measured 5.25 by 4 and is underneath these 2 layers. The flowers that are die cut here are from the Meadows dies. And then I added a little soft succulent ribbon to the card and some black matte dots again. So one of my favorite things to make are treat holders. I use the small scallop die to add a little touch to the closure of this box. Use some 3/8 inch vellum dots to hold it shut. I use the Candy Cane suite of products to decorate this treat holder and added a couple of bows and the snowflake embossing folder to the background. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope it gave you inspiration. Be sure to hit the subscribe button If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great stamping day. Bye-bye.